Okay, continuing with the lipids, we were talking about cholesterol. And remember, if you remember from the video, the phospholipid where you had the hydrophilic out here that loves water and the hydrophobic in here. Well, what that allows it to do is to move things through certain layers that they normally couldn't do. Okay, so it's really important to have that structure. So cholesterol is hydrophobic. Okay, it doesn't like water. And your blood is hydrophilic. It loves water, so they don't mix together. Okay. So when you get, too much cholesterol in there and it doesn't mix together, it gets deposited in your bloodstream. So it's carried throughout your body, and you have these protein packages called lipoproteins. Okay. And they are made up of lipids in there and on the inside of your cells. But when you have these lipoproteins that carry cholesterol throughout your body, there's two different kinds. There's the high density and the low density. Okay. One of them is good and one of them is bad. Okay. And if you've ever had your cholesterol checked, you probably know which one is which. Okay. So are you going to go to the next one? Here we go. So the low density, sometimes called the bad. So your low density cholesterol, what it does is it builds up and it doesn't mix. It does not mix with your blood. It gets deposited into your arteries, and it gives you a much better chance of having heart disease. If you've heard of people that have had like blocked arteries, that's what they're blocked with, is LDL, low density lipids. Okay. Or if you've had, people have bypass surgery to fix that, or they have angioplasty, all those things have to be done in order to remove that. Okay. HDL, high density lipids, is actually good for you. It's good cholesterol. Okay. HDL carries cholesterol from other parts of your body back to the liver, and then the liver can remove it. So LDL can't be removed. The liver can't take care of it. It just floats around in your blood and then it gets deposited in your arteries. But HDL cholesterol is the good stuff, and your liver will actually remove it, and it helps lower your chances of getting heart disease. So you want your HDL cholesterol to be high, and you want your LDL to be low. So that makes sense. Low is bad for you. You want it to be low because if you have high, it's too much. But high density lipids is the good stuff. Okay, so you might have heard of good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Hyperlipidemia is meaning too much lipids in your bloodstream. Okay. And here's what happens. Like, here's your normal artery, the wall of it. Okay. When this cholesterol, the LDL, is floating around in your bloodstream, and again, remember, it won't mix, it'll get deposited inside your blood cells. And you might think this is soft because you think of fat as being kind of squishy. It's not. It's hard. It's called plaque, and it's hard. And if it gets too much, and unfortunately, the place it gets deposited the most is in your the arteries on your heart. Okay, so it'll narrow those, and you've heard maybe of somebody having angioplasty, they have this like little tool that rotarudes out there. It'll clear this out. It'll cut it out. Okay, or if it's just completely blocked, then what they'll do is a bypass. They'll have to take like a vein from your leg, and then they'll just put it here, and then they'll bypass it here because this is completely blocked. Okay, so that's where it comes from. So people that have that don't have good LDL, in other words, they have high levels of the low density lipid, have a much higher risk of having heart disease, and they could have heart attacks. You can need bypass surgery, or what, like I said, angioplasty, where they go in and clean that out. Okay, so if you get your cholesterol done, there's some things you need to know. First of all, your total cholesterol should be less than 200 milligrams. As you get older, it can go up a little bit, but in general, you want to be under 200. You want your low density lipids, the bad stuff, the bad cholesterol, to be less than 100. And you want your high density to be at least 40, if not higher. Okay, and like I said, genetically, some people have high density lipid. It's just a genetic thing, and they have low. So you can't say, if a person's kind of chubby, kind of overweight, that they'll have high cholesterol. It doesn't, when you're overweight, you have a higher chance of having, more cholesterol, but it's not really based on that. I'd say it's diet, and a lot of it's genetics. Okay, and then your triglycerides, they can also test that. You want that less than 150. So if you just get like if you give blood, they'll do a cholesterol test. That won't give you a very good indication because it'll just give you this number. You want to look at all the numbers. Excuse me. The National Cholesterol Education Programs recommends this, okay? And if you're over 20, you should get your cholesterol level checked every 5 years. Okay? So here's Pete's. His total cholesterol is 233. That's not good. Okay? His high was 55. That's good. But his low is 122. That's bad. So this is good, but this is too high. This is too high. And his triglycerides are okay. Okay? So he needs to adjust his diet, maybe exercise more. You can take medications to help change this as well. The bad thing about if you have to take like Lipitor to lower your cholesterol, it will, but it also interferes with your liver too. So then you have to get liver tests done, like I think it's every 6 months to make sure that you're not damaging your liver. So, you can lower your cholesterol by taking one of those meds, but what else are you doing to your body by doing that? Okay. So he was surprised that, he's young and he's relatively active and he's a little overweight. He thought he ate pretty well, but maybe not so much. So what he needed to do, he needs to reduce the amount of saturated fat and cholesterol in his diet, read the labels, lose a little weight, and exercise a little bit more. Okay. So again, if you haven't, you should get your cholesterol checked. If you're over the age of 20, you should do that to make sure. And again, 200 for your overall cholesterol. You want your HDL to be above 40. You want your LDL to be under 100. And you want your triglycerides to be 150 or lower. Okay. Okay. So if KFC already cooks their chicken in vegetable oil, then what's the problem? Okay. It's corn oil. It's not saturated, right? And no more burgers and fries. Well, burgers are okay if you grill them. Okay. Don't fry them, grill them. So there's a lot of things you can figure out that way, the way you prepare your food. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of this, but frying is just not good for you. When it comes right down to it, fried food is just, it's got a lot of not so good. And margarine, you guys, margarine is 1 carbon away from plastic. So keep that in mind. So a little bit of butter is better than margarine. If you eat a lot of it, well, you shouldn't eat a lot of either of them. But honestly, butter's better than margarine. Okay. So there's bad fats and there's good fats. One fat you want to stay away from is something called trans fats. And they add trans fats to make food last longer. Okay, it's something to help make sure. And margarine never goes bad. That's another thing. Pretty close to plastic. So trans fats they're present in a lot of foods, but they're a transition from an unsaturated to a saturated. And again, they put them in foods kind of as a preservative so that they don't go bad. Well, the problem with them is they're not good for you. Okay. So a trans fat is usually kind of, let's see, what do we got? A liquid fat that's chemically changed to a solid fat is a trans fat. Okay. So, it might say vegetable oil, but if it's solid, you guys, it's been modified and it's a trans fat and it's not good for you. So solid fats are not good for you. Liquid fats are much better. Liquid fats tend to come from plants. Solid fats tend to come from animals. Okay. So trans fats, they say, are a double whammy because trans fats come from adding hydrogen to vegetable oil. So you take an unsaturated fat, which is okay, it's relatively good for you, and you add more hydrogen to it. So it breaks a double bond, adds hydrogen in, and then you get single bonds, and now you've got a saturated fat. And that's called hydrogenation, and it's just what it sounds like. You add hydrogen. Okay. Partially hydrogenated oils may contain higher levels of trans fats. So again, like I said, trans fats tend to be more solid than oils. Trans fats, the reason why they do it, the reason why they add it is a preservative. It increases the shelf life of your foods, but you really don't want them in your diet. They're not good. Okay. So unlike other fats, trans fats both raise your bad cholesterol and lower your good cholesterol. That's why they call it a double whammy. So stay away from trans fats. Okay. So which of this doesn't contain trans fats? It would be your grilled hamburger. Maybe the frozen chicken nuggets. It depends on how you cook them, how they were cooked. But I would say grilled hamburger is your best bet there. And when it's trans fat free, it actually has less than 0.5 grams per serving. You want 0, obviously, but there's always seems to be a little bit of always of something in there. So you want less than 0.5, and it'll be on your label. Okay. So it has to be. You can see in January 2006 is when they said, hey, you got to start listing saturated fats, cholesterol, and trans fats in the label. Before that, they didn't have to list it. It was just like more like calories and carbohydrates and proteins. But they have to list the fats and break them down. And again, like I said, foods with 0.5 grams or less are considered trans fat free. So they might have a little bit. Okay. And again, if the ingredient list includes words like shortening or partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, you know there's trans fats. Okay. Because that's what they're doing. They're adding a preservative, but they're making it sound different. Okay. And again, look where they're listed on your ingredients list, because when you look at ingredients on a label, the thing that's the most is listed first. So as you go down, when you get toward the end of the list, then that substance isn't in there as much. They have to go in percentage-wise order. Okay, and that's it for fats. So again, we didn't spend a ton of time on the structure. I think you get the idea, and that's our second biomolecule. So now we're done with this chapter.